children, I'll tell you the news. Don't worry about the names or dates, you already know it's true. Your doctor hates your baby, the prime minister's a ghost, and all them folks are sailing here 'cause they're in love with boats. Superfoods can save us from all our evil sin. JFK and Elvis own a bar in Wisconsin. And vaccinations were created by the CIA to steal votes from Bernie Sanders and turn your babies gay. So click the link you think you'd like and get tooled for a fight against those lefty fascist communists who are leaning too far right.
Hi, and welcome to Not Another Fake Newscast. I'm Paul.
And I'm Jerry, and we are here today with Alex Thomson. We're delighted and very excited to be speaking with a very respected and seasoned broadcast journalist. Alex previously worked for the BBC before joining Channel 4 News in 1988. He's won multiple BAFTAs and a TV Journalist of the Year award, and has covered many hard-hitting stories, including investigations into Hillsborough, Bloody Sunday, and pretty much every war in my living memory, certainly. So welcome, Alex. Delighted to have you here.
Yeah, likewise. Very pleased. Thanks for having me.
So to start off, we always like to ask our guests who kind of work in the journalism profession how they got into journalism. So how did it happen for you, Alex?
Right. I suppose sort of classic. I'm an unusual beast. I've never really done anything but television, and I've had a backwards career because I started off in half-hour documentaries, and now I'm washing around in often on the day news. So I did an English degree at university, wrote a lot of journalism, did a lot of journalism, and I then thought, well, I'm coming to the end of university, I get some job. And then that seemed a very scary prospect. So I applied instead to a variety of journalism courses and got a place down at Cardiff, which then, as now, is one of the leaders of a postgrad one-year entry journalism courses. So it essentially designed to sort of turn namby-pamby arts graduates like me into someone who might not fall totally on their face when they go into a newsroom if anyone was foolish enough to give me a job. And on the back of that, I then applied again for a second time to the BBC trainee scheme. Back in the day, the BBC took about 6 people a year on a sort of fast track scheme, and I got a place on that, and then immediately panicked, so deferred it, went off and rode a bicycle across India, wrote a book about that, then came back and then did the BBC trainee scheme. So by the time I actually got a job, and the first job was doing half-hour current affairs documentaries for BBC television in Belfast, I was ridiculously overtrained. I'm not sure that's the same as being competent, but certainly done a lot of. I was trained to pieces. But because Belfast back in the 80s was an amazing place to learn your craft. No question about it. And fantastic people, very warm, very welcoming. I thought they might have no business to sort of welcome, as I say, sort of an outsider sort of swanning in, but I got enormous guidance from people, and been going back there ever since.
Nice.
Yeah,
so
we'll go to Belfast. We're just going to say Jerry's wife is actually from Northern Ireland as well, so we.
Oh right.
Yes, we find ourselves there from time to time. It's a lovely place. It's a lovely place. Yeah,
well, fantastic people. I mean, my lot are all sort of from the northeast, Geordies really. I mean, Geordies and people in Northern Ireland, Belfast, and we've got a lot in common. There's great warmth, great friendliness, and a great lack of pretension.
Yeah.
So how did you find it over there, cutting your teeth as a journalist during the tail end, certainly, of the Troubles? Because I suppose that's really when that was all.
Yeah, it was incredible looking back on it. I mean, the trust you were given. I remember the very first day I was there. I did a session as a trainee there before I actually got a job on Spotlight, which is a TV current affairs program then as now. And I remember one morning just being told, well, you got to go out and interview Jerry Adams. And I was halfway down the corridor, completely excited, and realised I got a tape recorder with me. So it was that kind of place. You were just, given incredible opportunities to deal with kind of, pretty major stories. This was a place back in the 80s when people were sorting out their politics with guns and bullets and semtex and so forth, as well as, allied conventional, quote unquote, politics. So, as a trainee to go there, it bore no comparison whatsoever with anywhere else in the United Kingdom. In many ways, still doesn't. So that was an astonishing place to learn your craft. To learn that there are reasons why people will commit acts of violence and undergo enormous sacrifices for various political reasons, and on both sides of the sectarian divide. Whether it's the defense of a way of life or a struggle for a different dispensation. To learn very early in your early 20s that people are prepared to do that rather than kind of be obsessed with some of the more mundane things of life was an extraordinary thing to learn for someone like me.
And when you went there, Alex, was it a massive learning curve for you in terms of the kind of politics and the way society was kind of structured in Northern Ireland? Were you aware of the sectarianism before you went there, or was that something that you very much learned when you arrived?
I was aware of it, but in fact, as a journalist, I mean, being aware of it is no preparation for it. You're aware that the guns go off, but until you've experienced this, you don't know the difference between incoming and outgoing fire. And you don't know what a plastic baton round sounds like. You certainly don't know what it feels like. This one certainly hit me in the leg. So you don't know what a bomb going off. Of course you don't. You don't know any of this stuff. As a journalist, it was very interesting to me because I think then and now there was a difference of cultural approach between the Republican and loyalist psyches with regard to the media. It seems to me then, and it seems to me now, that Irish republicanism had learned very early on how to engage with, use, if you like, and certainly work with the media. The loyalist psyche was much more defensive, much more suspicious, and therefore it was very difficult, I think, ultimately perhaps for the media to serve that community in the same way that they, in many senses, serve the nationalist and Republican community. It was just a difference of psyche, and that surprised me greatly. Coming over as a Brit, I thought I would be this enormous resentment, if not outright hostility and violence from nationalist and Republican communities. And I thought naively I would be welcomed and accepted into the fold, as it were, by loyalist and unionist communities. In fact, the very opposite was the case.
That's interesting. That's entirely not what I would have expected either. So I read in another interview that you did that essentially the kind of reason that you ended up leaving the BBC was due to one of the reports that you had done during your time at Spotlight with regard to reporting on the SAS killing IRA members in Gibraltar. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, that was a pretty high-profile saga at the time. I'm happy to regurgitate it if you need that. But yeah, it was. Well, I did leave under interesting circumstances, shall we say.
I mean, I think our listeners would like to hear the story because from me reading the story, from me and Jerry talking about it, it's a really good example of when journalistic integrity takes over. When the story has to make its way to the public, regardless of where the kind of rules of the establishment get in your way. You really have to find that. So yeah, I think it'd be an interesting story if you would like to regurgitate it.
Yeah, no, sure. I mean, there's nothing more. It's hard to get back into the psyche where we were in the mid '80s. Margaret Thatcher in power. I think this was before the broadcast ban, where we couldn't hear Sinn Féin. But the sensitivities over broadcasting politically difficult stories and investigations in Northern Ireland, it's almost hard to overestimate. Anyway, long story short, we'd gone to Gibraltar. Three, Sean Savage, Dan McCann, and Mairead Farrell, a three-person active service unit, as the Provisional IRA would term them. they had gone to bomb a military parade in Gibraltar. In the process of wrecking that, they were ambushed and shot dead by a plainclothes SAS unit. The political sensitivity being that the British at that time were maintaining this was not a war. They still called it the Troubles. Not a word I'd use, but that was their term for it. And if you're not fighting a war, you can't have people running around shooting people dead who are unarmed, or at least you can. But you're going to face, or you should face, some sort of due legal process. You can't have it both ways. It seemed to me at the time that the British did want it both ways, for better or worse. So anyway, we did a film, and we got new witnesses and so forth to what had happened. And I got back, and the first I heard, it struck me we've just got a good story and it's fairly run the mill. And I remember having a trail which we cut, a 1.5-minute trail to go to be broadcast some days before the program. And I remember the editor running in. It was Sunday afternoon. He ran in his tracksuit. He'd just been home with the kids, whatever. Grabbed it out of my hand and said, "We can't put that out. We can't put that out." And then I knew things were not going to be straightforward. And anyway, it all built up, and eventually we had a large consignment of senior BBC suits come over from London. And the guy called John Conway, who was then the editor of News and Current Affairs in Northern Ireland, remarkable man, a man of absolute strength and integrity when it's most tested, as it was on this occasion, single-handedly was left to try and fight off the might of the BBC from London, who wanted to ban the film, or at least chop it right down to sort of a 5 or 7 minute film with a studio discussion. Basically, I walked out of that. I could see it wasn't, despite John's greatest efforts, it didn't look to be going terribly well. So I leaked the entire story to every journalist I could get hold of, which put me in one of those positions, I suppose. The BBC couldn't prove that I was the one who leaked all this, but equally, it's pretty obvious that it all led to me. The whole thing became a huge cause célèbre. The BBC were then forced to hand over some material. They handed over a piece to camera. So I'm to this day the only BBC reporter who's ever done a piece to camera as the top story on ITV's News at 10. I remember. I know, but somewhere upstairs in the attic, a scrapbook of cuttings. It was a huge thing at the time. And thanks to the efforts of John Conway, I think, rather than my leaking, the BBC did transmit the film in full, uncut. And a man called Richard Tate phoned me up one day and said, "Hello, I'm Richard Tate. I'm the editor of Channel 4 News. Would you like a job?" And I could see that my future with the BBC was probably somewhat limited. So I said, "Yes, please." when can I start? So yeah, that's how that took place.
It's a great story. Did you find it a difficult decision to make to leak that, or was it part of youthful exuberance, or was it a calculated decision? What do you think?
Yeah, well, it's a bit of all, a bit of both. Easy to kind of claim that you were showing some kind of integrity when you're, a single bloke, 21, 22, 23, whatever it was, 24, a bit older, with no mortgage, no ties, no kids. Yeah, easy to do. So, and it was easy to do. I mean, just seemed to me there was no ifs or buts about it. I think there was a danger that the BBC were going to cave in, and it just it was the only thing you could do. I think anybody would have done it in my position.
Yeah, I mean, there's sort of examples littered through your career of you kind of showing no fear, no favour in that respect, and kind of breaking stories or investigating stories that other people aren't touching. So moving on to something else, when we kind of look at our
I thought that was a brilliant segue into Rangers and Celtic there. Stories
do you know what? We can do that. We can do that because we were going to leave.
This guy's a pro. He's done this before. I was thinking.
I nearly did. Let's tell you what. Let's talk about that.
And I know that his plan was to ask that later on here. I thought that's what he'd set himself up for.
Well, you can't. Don't let me mess with the script.
No.
I fucked that one. Let's be honest. So yeah, I mean, somewhat unusually for a nationwide TV news broadcaster, the news channels would often be accused of being London-centric in their approach. You have somehow managed to find yourself involved in two of the biggest stories in Scottish football, and certainly the last 20 years at least. How exactly did you find yourself embroiled so heavily in those two stories in Scottish football, Alex?
Right. The answer to the first, Rangers, is an accident. And the answer to the second, Celtic, is a source making me an offer I couldn't refuse. Rangers, I'd spent the entire day having a very long and not unalcoholic lunch with Fred the Shred's best mate at a restaurant in Edinburgh. As I was trying then to get Fred the Shred, who's never spoken, he's never done an interview, to sit down and just sort of, make his peace, if you like. And that's why I'd gone to Edinburgh to try and do that. And I failed. But if you're listening, Fred, the offer's still there. I was going to see friends in Glasgow, so I went over to Glasgow that evening, and had a nice night in Glasgow, as it's certainly very possible to do. Woke up the next morning, and I was just about to leave, and I thought, well, I better phone the desk. And I phoned the desk, but the desk get him just talked off his bollocks for 5 or 10 minutes. And then he just suddenly, at the very end of the conversation, this is absolutely what happened. This guy's got no interest in football. But at the very end of it, he said, ow. I said, yeah. He said, this Rangers tax thing, it's kind of weird, isn't it? I mean, there's something there. I mean, it's quite a day down here. Why don't you spend the day, make a few calls, see where it goes? And what I should have said then was, no, far too busy. I'm on the next train. So I mean, and what unites both stories is, of course, not about football. One was about hyena capitalism, very like Fred the Shred, very like, it's capitalism gone mad, and that leads you into areas of unlawfulness and cheating at sport. And the other, of course, I've kind of vowed to myself that when the Rangers thing came to the Supreme Court was the final court of judgment. It laid judgment, said this was unlawful. So, there's a football club that they cheated their way to 13 trophies. Okay, nothing's been done about that, but the illegality of what they did is now enshrined and can never be gainsaid, right? So that was a point for me to jump off. Thought, well, I've done that, and I did quite successfully. But then literally a matter of weeks back, somebody called me who I can't say more in terms of their identity, and just gave me a way into the whole historic sex abuse stuff with new things to say. And again, like Rangers, have not been touched really out with Scotland, not in England at all. Which to this day I find just absolutely mind-boggling. A lot of people who would claim Scotland's firmly part of the Union and firmly the same country, in the London media, would be exactly the same people who managed to somehow miss this story or miss both stories and absolutely miss their enormous, relevance to big things like sport, like capitalism, like child abuse, but somehow treat Scotland as if it's it's part of the kind of Tierra del Fuego. Bizarre. I mean,
There is a certain amount of truth in what you're saying there, but I think it's also important to note that there's not been a huge amount of coverage of, or there certainly wasn't initially, of either of those things in Scotland. While the Times, in fairness, has done some excellent work on the Celtic paedophilia stuff, the Sun, to a lesser extent, has kind of echoed a little bit of it. It hasn't
Daily,
really
BBC. There's. I don't know. This for me is a kind of replay of Rangers where everybody said, "Oh, you're the only one who's covering this," and quick dip into Google, it's clearly not true. I mean, there's a lot of guys out there who've done a lot of good work on both stories. I would have said. I mean, it's certainly true in the Rangers story that the best work was done by people online. The Rangers tax case guy and Phil McGillivan.
I think he won an Orwell Award for that work, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, right. Yeah. So I think he won that as I can't remember what the award was, but he did. But it was some. So that was an odd one because there was plenty of coverage. There really was, but it was led by the online people. There's no doubt about that. I wouldn't say there's been a dearth of coverage of the historic sex abuse. There's perhaps not been. How can I put this? There's perhaps been a reticence for people in the media to say, look, Celtic have a problem here. They have a materially bigger problem, right? I know there are 9 paedophiles who've been associated either directly with that football club or with the boys' club, which I think, by common logical consent, is also the football club. And I think that the piece I did kind of laid enough proof of that. That's a huge story for anybody. And it amazes me that that's not aroused more interest in England. If only because there are quite a lot of Scots live in England, don't you know? Quite a lot live in London and read newspapers, and quite a lot of them support Celtic, or support Rangers, in which case they're equally interested in the story in an inverse way.
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, it happened with Man City a couple of years ago, and Man City essentially put their hands up and apologised for their involvement in this. I mean, cards on the table, I'm a Celtic fan. I'm a season ticket holder. Most of our listeners will be aware of that. But I find the position of my football club on this to be shameful, really. And I kind of understand from a financial point of view why they might be legally trying to distance themselves from the boys' club. But I think it kind of makes a mockery of the principles which we sometimes claim to have built our club on when we're trying to worm our way out of kind of owning up to this, making a formal apology and making sure that the people involved are compensated in the manner that they deserve to be.
Celtic's position makes sense financially. Full stop.
Yeah.
But not really ethically.
But the problem is there are more things than finance involved here,
Of course.
Like being civilized. I mean, their position is revolting, frankly. Just as Rangers' position over the tax thing was revolting. I mean, the Rangers should have handed back the 13 trophies or whatever it was that they cheated their way to, and exactly the same way, of course, Celtic should own up. The terror going on is absolutely financial. Clearly, Manchester City have very deep pockets. I think it's a reasonable assumption that Celtic have been putting away money somewhere, a fair few millions, to deal with this. And we actually talked to the victims. They want so little, They want so little. And Gordon Wood's sitting up there, just up the road from where you are in Aberdeen. He said to me, I'm not sure we used this, he said to me, look, if Celtic laid on a good dinner, had us all down, a good dinner, made a donation of a couple of £1 million or £1 million or something to a children's charity, and said, yeah, this was an appalling, shameful blight on the entire culture and history and heritage of our club, runs counter to everything, of course, that we profess to believe in. I'd be satisfied with that. That's what he wanted, and it's very often the way with these things. If people, okay, what they say and what they do might be different things, but there are very good ways. There are very professional people out there who are very good and very capable of screening individuals who are coming forward with fraudulent intent. And let's face it, they would come forward with fraudulent intent if they sensed a pot of gold. Of course they would. Well, yeah, Manchester City have found ways around that, and I could bore you with what they are. But it's not that difficult to do that. But you do have to do it, because Celtic are not coming out of this very well, and it is equally astonishing. And I didn't do any work on this one. I didn't do any broadcasts. It is, to me, astonishing that Scottish society has saw fit to let exactly the same people who fell asleep on the job investigate the same thing all over again, namely the SFA and namely Celtic. Celtic investigated this, found nothing to see, and said, it's been such an appalling, these scurrilous rumours that, We hope that any officials of the club would go, if they go to a court of law, would be able to bury these awful rumours for good. That was in 1986. So I mean, Celtic are hardly competent to it. You can't, you don't expect you don't have the police investigate the police, and that seems to me amazing, given that Scotland's already set up a public inquiry, a judicially led, judge-led public inquiry, Lady Smith, into vast areas of other aspects of Scottish life and culture and society, which went wrong for exactly the same reasons. Somehow football is left to investigate itself. That's a calumny. And I think that is something which should be laid squarely at the door of the Holyrood Parliament, who have not sought fit to do that, And it's not a question of taking on one club, because we know the Celtic network, the paedophile network goes between Celtic and Rangers if you want to play that game. We know it does. We know the individuals concerned. We can make the connections. They're all there. That's a matter of public record. This isn't difficult, and it goes to other major clubs as well.
Well, I hope that we can continue. The good journalists in this country and yourself can continue to put pressure on the clubs and the SFA and the government to look into this fully and to bring some kind of justice to the victims of that. In Scotland, we do, certainly the west of Scotland, we have this kind of divide, this split in our society. It seemingly to myself anyway, people of my generation, our society seems to be extremely fractured at the moment in the entire UK, with things like Brexit, with things like the Gender Recognition Act, even driving a wedge through the nationalist movement, for example, in Scotland. Social media and politics seem to drive people to extremely partisan positions. As a journalist who's been around since the 80s, have you seen society as divided as it is at the moment before, or is this a new thing?
Christ, yes. Society, this is absolute bunk, this idea that the society is divided at the moment. I mean, have people got no memory? Have they got no history? The miners' strike, that was a division. People bang on erroneously about, isn't the division over Brexit awful? There has not been one instance of serious or unserious social disorder or violence caused by Brexit. Not one, right? No, the miners' strike, 2 people were killed. One guy was killed in South Wales by people throwing rubble off a bridge. Someone else was knocked over at a picket line. People died. That was a violent. You can go back to the Peterloo massacre. You can choose any one of a galaxy of examples of where British society has been way, way, way more divided than it is now. I do not think British society is divided. I think British society is extremely healthy, extremely robust, and extremely coherent. Frankly, I really do. I just do not see any evidence of this. We seem to be sort of dying of fear. It's a kind of almost sort of in the same way that social media, conflates people's ability to be hurt and upset by things. I'm not seeing it. If British society was divided, you would see violence on the streets. That's what you'd see. It's not happening.
Do you think, as you mentioned social media, do you think that now people can go on social media and voice their opinions to the world without being on the picket line, without being out in the streets, and essentially they're not out fighting, they're not out protesting outside Westminster and throwing bricks at the police because they now just go mad on their keyboard for 25 minutes and get to voice their opinion, and that's it. They've said their piece and the world can see it.
It might be the greatest safety valve we've ever invented, except that, I'm not averse in certain circumstances. People go out on the street and break the law, but that can be very effective. The poll tax riots at Trafalgar Square is the most effective piece of political action I've ever seen in my life in this country. In the space of a few hours, the poll tax was put to bed. So you have to be very careful when you kind of say rather prissily, that social disorder on the streets is necessarily a bad, necessarily destructive thing. It's not always. That's a difficult thing to say, but
I would fully agree with you.
I think that it's very easy to get very black and white about this stuff. But I think there's no doubt that social media, I think, does sort of provide some kind of safety valve. But you're not going to be thin-skinned. I mean, if anybody looked through my feed, I had a nice message today from a guy. It's unfair to name him, so I'll just call him David McNally because that seems to be his name. Just saying, I'm a lifelong Rangers fan. I've got to say, though, that what you did over Celtic has been good. But that doesn't in any way, get over what you did to my club. And I still think you're a total cunt, So, am I worried? No. Am I worried about, when people kind of call it, say you're a paedophile, they know where you work, they send you bullets in the post or they send you shit. I mean, really, one of the things that does amuse me, I have to say, guys, about the west of Scotland, and particularly about Glasgow, is that Glasgow, and I love the city to bits, I genuinely do, but there is a self-image about Glasgow and Glaswegians that it's all about extremity. This is the toughest city in the world, This is the most vicious rivalry and strong rivalry between its football clubs of any city in the world. It's utter nonsense, Glasgow's a soft play area by comparison with most of the places I've spent the last 30 years. It really is. But it has this kind of, sort of pressure cooker self-image of itself, which of course comes over more than any other forum when it comes to football. But it amuses me more than anything else because it's just. It's just so not true.
Well, you gave us an excellent segue there. This is the wonder of working with professionals. So exactly what you just said. From all the places that you have, all the war zones, I know no war zone is particularly great, but where was the one place? I mean, there must be one place, a place where you actually felt the most at risk. Where was where was the place that you were glad to be getting out of most when you've been when you were being a war correspondent?
Oh, I don't know. As a place, that's always those sort of questions people always are very, very difficult to answer because they're based on the idea that war is one thing, and I can't compare. You can't compare. Being jumped at a roadblock by a bunch of very stoned 7 to 12-year-old heavily armed soldiers in Sierra Leone, you can't compare the difficulties of talking your way and getting out of that when the day before one of your colleagues has been shot dead at exactly that place. You can't compare the almost intimate, close-up fear, adrenaline of that situation with just the sort of grinding awfulness and jangliness of just being in a place when you're being shelled. They're just very different forms of tension and stress, I think. So, it's very hard. If you're sort of sitting underground in somewhere like Vukovar or in eastern Croatia and in the Balkans or in Syria or someplace, and you're being shelled, that's a very different sort of fear to how you are when, someone's got you spread eagled in the dirt and they're pressing a gun to the back of your head, It's very, I'd probably choose shelling, actually, if I had to choose the two. But there's always, these things are always, there's always a sort of calculated risk. You go to some place, go into a situation which may look one way when you go in, and then the situation can rapidly change in a matter of days, in a matter of hours, and you suddenly realize we've kind of miscalculated here. We shouldn't have gone down that road. We've got ourselves into something that might be, difficult to get out of. So it's always different. It's just always different. I mean, what does become familiar is that awful gnawing fear, and the fear is not, and for me primarily, if I'm absolutely honest, it's not primarily for yourself or that something bad might happen, but it's your responsibility for the people around you, because you're kind of the most person there, and also your responsibility to people back home. To people back home. That's the thing. You are not on your own. I have a wife, 2 kids. You're not a family. You're not. You have wider responsibilities.
So there's a question. Obviously, I think a lot of your war correspondence has been amongst some of your most acclaimed work. But what is it that, I mean, you could easily have been sitting at home covering domestic stories in a pretty safe environment. What made you choose to to go to these places and cover these stories as a foreign correspondent in war zones? What drove you to do that?
Yeah, well, that's the choose is the right verb, because of course no one's forced to do this stuff. Very much not, and that would not just go for ITN. I can speak for all broadcasters in the UK. Do you know what? I think it probably goes back to Belfast. Probably goes back to that idea. There I was, sort of 21. I remember one day I was going to go. I knew I had to go to the Building Society to do something, and I was going to. So I was on the Tuesday, and I was going to go to the Building Society on the Wednesday. And Tuesday night they blew the Building Society up, so it wasn't there anymore. And I think that just sort of, it's just. We just drive around West Belfast with some joyriders. This guy said, "Do you want to see?" This guy, 12-year-old kid, said, "Do you want to see me ride, mister? Do you want to see me ride?" It was quite sure what he meant, there's some kind of sexual innuendo. And he produces a loaded Magnum, and we're like 200 yards from an RUC, as then was, checkpoint. I said, "Just put the gun away, Robert. Put the gun away right now." And I think those sort of things early on in your career do, they give you a certain interest for situations where people are sorting out their politics by, shall we say, unconventional methods, or maybe was the most conventional of all. I don't know.
Is there an element of thrill seeking about it, perhaps?
I would be lying. Yeah, it gets us into uncomfortable territory, doesn't it, perhaps? But I would be lying if I didn't say I would be more interested in going to somewhere which was a situation of, a degree of risk, I would be a lot more keen to go there than standing outside Parliament every day, pontificating about who said what to whom about Brexit or public sector borrowing requirement or whatever. That would just do me head in. But it worked, and equally, reporting on the city, the Dow's gone down 500 against the bitch or whatever, day to day. But that would do me. So I need that variety, I think. So I never sort of settled to anything in terms of a speciality. But yeah, I think there is an element, I think there is an element of if you're drawn to these sorts of things, and you tend to work with the same people who are equally drawn to them. The danger is when you do it can get addictive. And I've seen that where everybody in the business could call to mind people who've gone down that road. And, and it's important to say no. It's important to do other things.
Yeah. So you wrote a book about your experiences in the first Gulf War. I believe it was called Smokescreen, the Media, the Censors, the Gulf. So tell us about your experiences of censorship during the Gulf War. Then, what did you find? What compelled you to write that?
What compelled me to write it was the producer who said, stop getting so angry about it. Write a book. That's exactly what he said. And build on Locke, a man of fine judgment, as many are who are from Coatbridge. Here's what he said. So he said, and that set me thinking, because I did the next day. I thought it's quite early on, and because it was an appalling situation for the media. You couldn't go anywhere. The Saudis wouldn't let you get anywhere. So it was constant cat and mouse, trying to waste all your time getting around roadblocks in the desert and da-di-da-di-da, and you were totally reliant on these almost sort of rerun of the 4 o'clock follies back from the days of Vietnam, which I'm too young to remember, but you read about, Michael Hare's dispatches and books like that. You grew up with as a baby journalist, and I thought, well, here we are, we're into one of these things where, the truth shall be handed down by a man in a uniform at whatever hour of the day it is, and that's pretty much all we'll get to see of this war. And that struck me as a wholly unsatisfactory experience. And so that's what that was all born out of, really. Yeah.
I'd recommend our listeners go and get a copy of that and have a read of it. It seems that there was a few sort of incidents and events early in your career, censorship and attempted censorship and things like that, which you really kind of railed against, which really did get you angry. I've read in a previous interview of yours that I think it was basically sort of criticising somebody who'd been whinging about their experience of the journalistic profession.
It was the Guardian article where he stated that to be a journalist, like, you essentially feed on that anger. Like, don't worry about it financially, but like, integrity and anger are the things that you should be using to be a journalist, rather than worried about, making inner London high wages. Like, you're never going to be not never, but you're never going to be a multi-millionaire running as a journalist, but you're doing it because you're driven by your anger, by your desire to get the story out.
I think that's absolutely true, and I talk a lot about anger when I speak to students. I think anger is a much underrated virtue. In fact, it's probably not even considered a virtue, is it? But I think it's a great motivator, just to be angry. Why the fuck are things how they are? What's going on? Why doesn't someone do something about that? Why are things the way they are when it's the, and I don't think this is particularly a political point or a party political point, but it's the same old nexus. Why are rich and powerful institutions, sometimes individuals, lying and defrauding powerless people out of their rights, out of a fair deal, and if that's a political point, so be it. But I mean, so much that's so wrong stems from that nexus. It seems to me it's a fairly simple worldview, but it does seem to be borne out. And what you've got is just the most incredible privilege. You've got every day when you get out of bed, you've got the ability, even at a basic level, to open doors which most people don't have. You can pick up the phone and say, "I'm Joe Blogs from such and such a place, Channel 4 News, and I'd like to ask you about such and such," and by and large they have to hear you, or up to a point they have to hear you. Sometimes other methods have to be employed, but that's an enormous privilege that most people just don't have that, and the sheer frustration and powerlessness of people who've been done down. People have not done anything wrong. They've tried to do by the rules and just been done down by the system in all sorts of ways. When they come to you as sources, that is one of the most satisfying things. What's been great about the Celtic thing is to see three individuals, who were brave enough to go on camera and to see the way in which all three of them are now empowered and strengthened by that experience. Because having a brush with the media is not always a wholly positive experience. Let's face it. To have them and see them on social media, going on and keeping in touch with them and seeing what they're doing and how they've been empowered and how that can maybe make other people come forward. The great thing about it is about having that privilege is you can change things. You can get things changed.
You can use it to do good in the world.
Yeah, we spent 16 years investigating the Mulligan Tire, but we got justice for the pilots who were wrongly blamed. We got it. The media played a big part. The families played a bigger part, but the media played a big part in righting some of the wrongs of Hillsborough. The families have got the truth. Whether they've got justice is not for me to decide. Again, investigations into Bloody Sunday resulted in a fulsome apology, and the Savile inquiry, biggest public inquiry we've ever seen in these islands. There are problems with Savile, and they're manifold, but that in part again was as a result of media interest.
I suppose from the war correspondent point of view as well, there's that side where if you are there and you are telling the story that's there, then much as what you were talking about with the Gulf War and stuff like that, like there then isn't the news that's only coming from the vetted people. If you're there and you're in the front line, you are able to tell the story that is there rather than the story that is being told by the army, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a very good example which worked well in our favour with Martin Regev, who was for many years the sort of chief Israeli military political spokesman. He was the guy the Israeli state wheeled out when difficult things were happening. And then this was when one of the invasions of Gaza was going on. And basically, because it's exactly your point, because we'd actually been to the place and spoken to the people and seen that and interviewed eyewitnesses and knew what had happened. We knew what the Israeli army had done. So I was, able to, looking back, it went a bit viral at the time, but I was able to lay a punch or three on Mark live. Mark's he's a very skilled operator at what he did. But I'll tell you a little story. When we came off, it was all the live segment. So when we kind of finished and unplugged, I thought I was slightly tensing up, slightly fronting up, because I thought there's a chance he could hit me. I thought he was really that angry. And he walked over to me and he stuck his hand out and he said, "You do a good job, Alex." He's quite Australian actually when he's not. He comes over a bit Israeli when he's on camera, but when he's not, he's quite Australian, his background. But yeah, so that kind of that was an interesting example of how, because we were able to go and verify, you could say, well, actually, Mark, I was there, and that's when just sometimes you can really get a good purchase.
Yeah, and again, I'll put the link up to that particular video. I was watching it myself today, actually, before this interview. So yeah, I'll put it up so that the listeners can watch it, because it's well worth a look. So, I mean, I know that you said earlier that you're not somebody who would ever want to be standing outside of Westminster and having to deal too much with politicians and stuff in the UK, but there seemed to be a bit of sort of bad blood, or a little bit of a frisson between the Conservative Party and Channel 4 News during the last general election. So I was interested to sort of get your insight as to whether you think the way that political parties and politicians interact with the news media throughout your career has changed at all, and in what way do you think it's changed, if it has?
Not sure it has. It was scratchy then, it's scratchy now. Long may the scratchiness continue. I remember, when John Knott walked out many years ago on Sir Robin Day, when Robin Day said to him, "So if I can put it to you as a frankly here today, gone tomorrow politician," for your listeners who are old enough to remember my appalling take-off of Robin Day. John Knott got up, he was the then defence minister, was run up to the Falklands thing, got up and walked out, Well, I mean, that's terrific, because, that's those sort of squalls and squabbles, and I think that's what they are very much in the run of things. I mean, I remember I was presenting Channel 4 News we got Cameron. Cameron was running for the leadership, and it was a big thing at the time as to whether Cameron had ever taken drugs. And I said, they wanted me to say, well, you do an interview about whether he's ever taken drugs. I say, I won't do an interview about whether he's ever taken drugs, because I think it's just, frankly, it's just wanky whether anyone's ever taken illegal drugs. The issue is whether he's ever taken illegal drugs when he's a politician, because as a politician, he has the capacity and is likely to be involved with formulation of drug policy, putting people in prison, punishing people in various ways if they've used illicit substances. That is a story, I'll happily do that. Anyway, we got him on, and it was a really hard. Did the interview about 7 minutes to 7, so it was real kind of smash. And the program editor was just said, ask him, yes or no, yes or no, yes or no, yes or no. And I went on, all right. And in the end, he said no, and was hugely angry. The Tories tried to pull the interview. It's completely futile. And as soon as anyone tries to do that, it's definitely going to be, you're bumping up a running order, aren't you? Really dumb thing to do. And Cameron didn't speak to the programme for about a year and a half after that. He was a bad loser. But you go through these, the night we did the blocks of ice in the climate debate, and they turned up, and there's a hilarious picture of me looking like a bouncer with Michael Gove. Look like I'm just telling him to fuck off. You're not the leader. Piss off. And you couldn't be further than the truth. It's actually quite amiable sort of conversation. It's quite an amiable bloke, Michael Gove, actually. And it was sort of smiling. Yeah, and he turned up with his own crew, and he said, I said, oh, you've got a 3-man crew, you've got a sound man Christ, Mike, we haven't seen one of those in 50 years here. How do you get the money? You know, it was all very kind of Josh. He was playing a game, we were playing a game, and you know, they then threatened to sort of, they would look again at license to broadcast or all kinds of stuff. You know, then they get into power and they start turning the heat up on the poor old BBC. You know, but these that sort of friction between broadcasters and politicians has always been there. You know, what does annoy me and still annoys me because is that I'm sure probably my Channel 4 News only exists because something like the BBC exists. We need a strong BBC for our own well-being generally and our future. And it annoys me greatly to see the right-wing newspapers, constantly savaging the BBC. You know, often in concert with certain aspects of the Tory party, and that seems to be very unfair and potentially very damaging. I know there are issues with the BBC in Scotland. I'm not going to get into that one because I don't know enough about it. But broadly speaking, I do think the BBC is an agent for, and I've always thought is an agent for good on that. You've only got to look at how news and current affairs broadcasting looks in other countries. You know.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
definitely.
If you've been to the United States, I mean, jeez, really?
Yeah.
So I think, and I'm only still talking about the BBC because I think we need strongly the BBC. We need a healthy news night. The programme is just going to cut 12 jobs and cut its investigations. That's not good. It's not good for the BBC. It's not good for Channel 4 News.
I mean, we as a podcast have been critical of the BBC's reporting in Scotland at times. I think fairly, but we would certainly definitely not be encouraging anybody to support some of the proposals that have been kind of floated in terms of how the Tory party might want to cut their budget, cut certain parts of the organisation, etc. We also believe that the BBC is an important institution here. I think so. Here's an interesting one. Are you aware? I presume you are of some of the comments that Peter Oborne made during the general election campaign about some of the political journalism in the UK. Alex, what are you?
No, not hugely. No. I'm very bad at reading what other people write. I just did sort of plough my own furrow, to be honest. But so I don't know what Peter was saying, but enlighten me.
So Peter essentially accused some of the political journalists in the country, and he named a few by name. I think he published it in Open Democracy, and he came on BBC and spoke to some people about it. Amal Rajan, he was on his show when he was filling in for Jeremy Vine, but he essentially called out Laura Kunsberg. He called out Robert Peston and various other political journalists for basically regurgitating the information that they were given from the Tory press office without questioning it properly. Yeah, and I wondered, what your opinion of that was.
I don't have one, to be honest, guys. I mean, that sounds evasive, but I mean that. No, I don't know. I didn't see enough of the coverage, probably, from and I'd observe it's an easy one for people to say, but there's someone from the outside, probably with limited grasp of the pressure under which those people are working, but without knowing what he was saying and in depth knowing exactly what he was referring to and what the circumstances were, I wouldn't feel qualified to comment on that. No, that's totally fair. Not fair to put you on the spot if you weren't aware of the controversy at the time. So another thing I wanted to ask you today is you kind of touched on this earlier yourself. So I'm very curious to hear what you have to say about this. Essentially,
one of the big things that we come across very often on our social media and our interactions with people is the amount of conspiracies that are banded around these days with regards to journalism, and that comes from both the left wing and the right wing. You see it from Jeremy Corbyn supporters. Equally, you see it from people who folk like Guido Fawkes, etc. And it's conspiracies with regards to journalism, the mainstream media, in inverted commas, in the BBC. If you could sit down with someone who would tell you that all of the media is an overarching conspiracy of press controlled by billionaires, what would you have to say to them, Alex?
Well, it is, I sometimes do, because I've had this long-running thing. A lot of journalists weren't in. You'd be familiar with Media Lens, the two Davids down in Southampton, or maybe not. I don't know. But they've they really taken it upon themselves to sort of take on certain sections of the media. They're very much. I mean, a lot of what they do is quite good. It's not sort of it's not particularly academically researched. Like going back more years than I care to remember, the Glasgow Media Group did very, very good work. On sort of back in the day, and this is way back in the day. When industrial disputes were a big feature of our news coverage. Why was it that the union guy was always sort of in a donkey jacket outside, but the boss man was always in a suit behind the desk? Just they drew our attention to some of the sort of unresolved and unconscious sort of biases in the media, and I think that mantle's been taken up a bit like me by Media Lens, and as you say, somewhat more extremely by people on the kind of the keyboard warriors and on the internet who have a very peculiar idea of how the media how it's all constructed. But what struck me was interesting when I asked the Media Lens guys to just come and have a chat and do exactly what you're saying. Sit down and say, how is this view? What informs this view? They won't do it. They'll only engage online. They won't engage in person, and that struck me as disappointing, sad even, but they wouldn't, they were almost safely ensconced behind their keyboards, but wouldn't come out from that world. I'd happily kind of, and I have done this actually on a couple of occasions. Another woman who was a bit like that, who kept banging on. I said, well, look, come along and see me, have a cup of coffee. We'll sit down and we'll talk, and I'll tell you how it all works. There really isn't any great secret here as to how the whole thing works. There is no great conspiracy. Nobody is telling us what to think. I think one of the worst problems actually is perhaps more obvious than that, which is that the kind of people who are at work in the media, particularly broadcast media, but newspapers as well, are very often from a certain sector of society. It's a very middle class, upper middle class world. We bang on rightly so about getting different ethnic minorities, people with ethnic backgrounds, BAME, people working, all the rest of it, all that, great, inclusivity, brilliant. But it's very hard to find working class people working as journalists in national newsrooms. And it was very hard when I entered, and it's still very, very hard today. That is, worry about conspiracy theories all you want. I mean, I've never found one that is anything other than fantasy. But that is one of the biggest problems I think we've got as a business that nobody even talks about.
So, I mean, do you think there's a potential solution out there to that? Or, I mean, for example, we've spoken to other journalists, and one of the things that we've seen mooted, and actually which has been kind of introduced in Finland recently, is a kind of change to the curriculum, is to try and encourage people with a bit more critical thinking when it comes to journalism, and try and encourage people from a young age to kind of understand the purpose of it and to be able to interpret it in an intelligent manner. Do you think that's something that might help encourage working class people to get involved?
All that would help. All of it, but it's a funny old world. Here we are in the 21st century, where in national broadcasting, a Welsh accent is acceptable. A sort of accent, English accent is acceptable. A Scottish accent is acceptable, but a West Country Bristolian accent, a Cockney accent, a Scouse accent, a Geordie accent, a Brummie accent, Mancunian accent, not really acceptable. Actually, not so much. It's pretty rare. It's pretty rare still. And you look at the 10 o'clock newses tonight and do an inventory of the accents that you'll hear, and the writing's there. It's on the wall.
Be able to count on one hand, I would imagine.
Well, yeah.
So as an end to this extremely interesting chat, Alex, I'd like to ask you what is the kind of piece or pieces of journalism you've been involved in throughout your career that you're most proud of?
Oh God! Oh man! That's like what's the worst, most dangerous situation you've ever been in? I'm going to give a sort of non-answer answer. You do some fantastic on-the-day pieces where you just get to the right place at the right time. You where the bomb went off in Syria, or you're where the riot happened with the BNP in the East End of London many years ago. You just can get the television moment, the event, right? Yeah. And that's extraordinarily satisfying. But how do you compare that with 16 years of investigation over the Mull of Kintyre, all the years of Hillsborough, Bloody Sundays, and or in the sort of the middle ground? I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, as we speak tonight, there's a certain satisfaction that I was constantly, and believe me, in a big way, badgered by people of a sort of a red, white, and blue persuasion in Glasgow, who said, hey Tom, a big man, you did all this stuff with us. What about Celtic? What about child abuse? Does that not merit you? Da-da-da-da-da. And talk about conspiracy theories. If people certainly put two and two together and made 76. So it is a certain satisfaction. In a relatively short time, we've sort of achieved a bit of balance on that. And it was also impressive too, actually, the number of the lack of vitriol I got from Celtic fans, and the number of fans who were saying, "Yeah, but absolutely, we've got to put our house in order." As you yourself have said tonight, we've got to put our house in order. There was none of this. Well, there was a bit of, but I expected just a million tons of whataboutery.
Yeah.
But it didn't transpire. It was actually very impressive. I think the fan base of Celtic know they've got a big problem.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of us were altar boys, so we're kind of used to all of that stuff. Sorry. Anyway, no, listen, Alex, it's been a real pleasure talking to you, and I hope that you can keep the career going and keep inspiring young people for a little bit longer.
It beats working.
It beats working for a living.
Yeah. Well, thanks, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks, Jess.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.